Welcome back. I'm Rebekah.
And I'm Gabe.
And we're back, babe.
I know, it's awesome.
We are back.
We're glad to kick off another season. We're calling this season The Rhythm of Us because we're building on our conversation from last season, The Fight for Us, which was the book that Rebekah and I were able to write together that launched, that so many of you have read. We've been just so encouraged by the amount of couples who have raised their hand and said, we're fighting for our marriage.
Oh, we are so grateful that those of you who listened to last season and you started putting into practice, we've got lots of responses from you over the summer, which I have to interrupt and say, we did kind of take a summer of us.
Yeah, we did.
We?
We decided
we went dark for a minute.
in our rhythm, we needed a little bit of a break, and we're so glad we
Yes.
did. But now we're refreshed and
we
excited.
got some emails like, are you guys coming back to the podcast? And we're like, yes, we are. We just needed a breather for a minute, and it was such a full summer of family and parenting. And
one of our sons got engaged, so
Yes.
that's been a big deal in our family. It's the first moment where a child made that decision to move into marriage themselves. So you can imagine the conversations over the summer. We're talking about marriage all the time.
All the time.
And then an engagement happens in June, and now they're getting married in just a few weeks.
I know. It's a quick one. They have a 3-month engagement, and Gabe and I had a 3-month engagement.
Yeah.
And they had just graduated college in May, and they were going to live in separate cities. And they're like, well, why would we do that if we could just get married sooner? And
this is our son, Pierce, who you've maybe met in a previous episode.
He's been on the podcast before.
And he's marrying Carlin, and she's just
love her.
amazing and wonderful. So
Yes, we love her. And it has been so sweet to actually... we're rookies as parents, and everyone who's listening knows this. Like, it's the first time you drop a kid off from college. It's the first time the kids come back home after they finish college. It's the first time you help them even think through an engagement or a proposal. I mean, there were so many new moments this year of parenting and marriage, I think. And then now just having a lot of conversations with them on how we are counseling them. They're getting counsel outside of us, let's be honest. But
they kind of were open to us
Yes.
being that, and we've tried to be good counselors for them, but we also encourage them. You need to talk to someone other than your parents.
It's true.
So that you just have a third party, an outside source that's not part of your origin story.
Yeah.
So you can make sure you're getting full perspective.
But it has made us honestly so grateful to have written this marriage book when we did, like the idea of it starting just a couple years ago, so that when we're actually being tested on this content, of like, is this going to stick as even just in our own family? Like, is this helpful and encouraging, and things that we wish we knew when we were your age, popping that question and making this big life decision. So it's been a joy, but more than anything, Gabe and I have missed just having this conversation here on the podcast. So we're glad to be back.
Yeah. And so I want to catch you up on a few things, exciting things that are happening. The Fight for Us had great momentum, became a bestseller this summer, thanks to so many of you. And just thank you for not only reading it yourself, but I know with this kind of conversation, it's very personal. It's very intimate. You're friends with people who ask you questions, and you realize, hey, they might be encouraged by some more inputs in their marriage. And so the word of mouth, the way this has started to spread, not only in the U.S., but we're hearing comments from people around the world who are reading this book, has been super encouraging. And coming up, there's 2 more releases happening at the beginning of this season. One is going to be the Fight for Us curriculum, and this is designed to give you 5 teaching sessions from Rebekah and I, along with a workbook that follows along and as a guide that goes along with the book, that's going to allow you to lead small group conversations, which so many couples have said that's where we can really get the most work done in our marriage, is sitting with other couples, listening, learning from each other, comparing notes, realizing we're not alone. And so that comes out October 7th. But then first, September 23rd, we launch something called the Journal for Us. And we are so excited about what this is.
We were as excited about this journal as we were about the book, which is not always the case. For a lot of people, it's like, I've got a journal to help you go through the book, but the content in the journal is unique to the journal, because what we learned as we wrote the book is that if you're not talking, you're not healing. And so many people we would mentor or coach through retreats or intensives would say, we just don't feel comfortable talking about these things. We would rather avoid them. It's not that we don't want to, we just don't know how. And so the journal for us is to guide you on the 10 conversations every couple needs to have. So we're telling you the 10 conversations every couple needs to have, but also how to have those conversations.
Yeah.
I think that's the bigger aversion that people have. It's like, okay, I got the conversations, but I'm so uncomfortable with how to navigate them. And so we understand that you need tools in your tool belt to have a healthy conversation where you kind of know going in, there might be a little friction here. We might not have the same opinion on things, but how do we love each other well in the dialogue?
Yeah, and that's where we're going to focus our time today on today's episode is how do you have a healthy conversation? If we've understood that in relationships, conversations is the gateway towards healing, and that when we avoid those conversations, when we try to handle them via text message, right, or leaving a voice message, but we don't know how to sit with somebody and engage the conversation, then we're missing a level of depth, intimacy, understanding, and bonding, literal healing and repair that can happen through conversation. And so we're going to get into that in just a moment. But the thing about this resource that I want to encourage you to go get this, if you read The Fight for Us, you're going to want the journal for us. And if you haven't even read The Fight for Us, go get the journal for us, buy The Fight for Us next. Because what we do here is we give each spouse in a relationship the opportunity to walk through these conversations, to reflect on your own. Because if you're like me, in the heat of the moment with Rebekah, it's pretty intense. Like, she's pretty much smarter than me psychologically. She can run circles around me in terms of what's happening in the relationship. A lot of guys feel this way about their wives. They respect their wives, but they know their wives are like ninjas when it comes to emotional health. And it's helped me a ton practicing what's in this journal, which is to go away and reflect on some questions, to have my own time to think through, why am I feeling this way? Why do I react this way when Rebekah says this? And by just getting the chance to process that as a spouse, each of you individually, but then we guide you through coming back together and then having that conversation. Maybe it's just a 15-minute conversation. Maybe for you, based on the topic, this is going to need a good evening. It's going to be an hour. It's going to be a weekend drive or a trip away where you're going to have these conversations. But we wanted to guide you carefully through how to have these significant conversations in ways that sometimes we don't always have the benefit of a counselor sitting in the room.
Right.
We love counseling. We've had counselors. But every conversation, you can't just dial up a counselor or hire them and go sit with them and have the conversation. We as couples have to build these kind of skills so that we know how to engage one another in a healthy way when conflict comes.
Right. It's so true. So many times we've done this to other friends, and they've done this to us, where we're like, emergency. We don't know how to have this conversation, and it feels so critical, and immediate and urgent. And so there's a desperation that can kind of follow that moment if you feel ill-equipped. And you do have the Holy Spirit, who is your comforter and your counselor and your advocate. So that's good. It is also helpful to have godly people around you who are equipping you in advance. And one thing that we do on this podcast constantly is normalizing prevention care, right?
Yeah.
To actually prepare and be equipped for something before it happens, And so our goal here is to do this. Like, maybe you and your spouse are feeling great and you've had all the dialogue you need, but there might be those two or three conversations that when they come up, one of you is triggered. And so we want to address that now. Address that through these 5 ways, these 5 tools in your tool belt.
Yeah, so let's talk about how to have healthy conversations. Let's get to the basics of, if you're struggling with having that conversation with your spouse, this is not only going to help you with your spouse, it's going to help you with your children, it's going to help you in the workplace, it's going to help you with your friends. But a way to have a healthy conversation is something that's becoming a lost art in a world that's really bent on text communication, or taking phrases that used to be real phrases and turning them into just letters, things like LOL, right? Laugh out loud. Like we've really reduced this ability to just talk with one another. And so the first step in having a healthy conversation is active listening.
Right.
And this is something that requires the listener to not just be observing information, not just kind of sit there thinking about what they're going to say next after their spouse has told them or is trying to share with them, but it actually requires you actively listening, which means not only hearing what the person's saying, but the way you demonstrate this is you actually repeat back to them, is this what I hear you saying? Mm-hmm. And you restate to the person who's communicating to you the information that you've just taken in and the way you're hearing it, and then you look for their affirmation. Am I hearing it correctly?
Yeah, you are 100% focused on what your spouse is saying, which means your phone should probably not be between you and your spouse.
That's right.
Because as much as you think you've put it down, it is so tempting to pick it back up. We'll be having a conversation, and then he's on his phone. He's like, well, I'm texting something about something you just said. Texting someone, because he's such an activator.
Yeah,
I mean,
I make a mistake in this one a
literally goes
lot.
from like, it's in my brain, now I'm doing it. I'm like, whoa. Like, we're still processing. I'm a processor verbally. I need more time. I'm like, who are you texting? I'll stop and I'll go, are you texting him right now about like what I'm saying right this second? Can we give it a little bit more of a pause? And so it's having no distractions in this active listening, giving them your full attention, your full eye contact is very important. And this isn't just for your spouse. This is really going to go far with your kids too. So just take note of that. I wanted to read a quote that we write in the book about active listening and why the temptation is to not do it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer says that so often Christians, especially preachers, think that their only service is always to have to offer something when they are together with other people. They forget that listening can be a greater service. There is also a kind of listening with half an ear that presumes to already know what the other person has to say. We wouldn't know anything about that.
That happens a lot.
This impatient, inattentive listening really despises the other Christian and finally is only waiting to get a chance to speak and thus get rid of the other. Now, when Gabe sometimes is in a hurry, I do not assume he's trying to get rid of me. I think what happens in this frenetic moment is that we always feel this sense of urgency. I don't know if you feel it as a listener. I know I feel it because there's so much coming at us. The task list is very long. The demands of parenting is wide, depending on how many children you have and how vast those needs are. The varied vocations, you might both work full time and you have a lot of details that need to be done. There's always just an urgency attached to that. And so you never really get to slow down long enough to not feel like we're trying to hurry whatever our exchange is. And as we've learned from a lot of other people who've written on the topic of hurry, is that it is hard to feel loved when you're being hurried. It's like I'm impatient. I need to get to the point. And sometimes we're sharing something that's pretty hard or heavy. I mean, and the whole point of this journal is to help you go there in some heavy and hard conversations. So you certainly can't rush that. So the goal of active listening is to be fully present. And that means in your posture, in physically, your body, your eye contact, and then no devices that would tempt you to pick them back up.
And that leads into the second skill that you need in a healthy conversation, and that's to mirror. So the idea of mirroring, and it's just like what it sounds like. You become a mirror to your spouse as they're communicating with you heavy things. Your response is appropriate to that. As you see them feeling the emotions, you're able to respond to that. You're being empathetic, and you're starting to give them a sense that they're being understood. So not only are your words back to them suggesting, I'm hearing what you're saying, here's what I hear you saying, but your posture, your form, the way you look at them, the way you put your arm around them, whatever it might be, helps them understand, like, you are with me. Like, I'm not alone in this. And the thing that I'm sharing that might be hard or awkward or difficult for me to even get up the courage to say, you're with me. You're not confronting and combative, but you're actually walking with me through that emotionally.
Yeah, so the mirror is what it sounds like. You are a mirror to them. So if someone's coming to you crying, you're not laughing in response. I mean, that seems somewhat basic, right? Or just big grins and they're like having their hardest day. Mirroring is you're meeting them where they are. So that they feel connected, they feel understood. And then making sure that as you mirror them, you are hearing them, that you are understanding, and making sure you're not making assumptions to what they're saying, but asking for confirmation. Like, so how did that feel, and what was that like, and just. You can continue to engage it just through more questions. We do this a lot in our idea in the home of no topic off limits that we've talked about all spring with our kids, but also in our marriage. If no topics off limits and someone's sharing something hard, then that just begets more curiosity. Like, tell me more. How does that make you feel? I want to make sure that you don't feel judged by me or feel dismissed, even worse, but that there's room to hold space for mirroring.
Yeah. And then the third skill is empathy. And Rebekah, I will say, in our marriage has led with empathy. She's always been more of an empath than I think I naturally am. I've tried to learn that, and it is something you can learn, but it's a feeling. Empathy can't be faked. It's the ability to sit in someone else's shoes, to be able to hear what they're experiencing, what they're trying to share with you, and for you to relate and to put yourself in their shoes and therefore be able to sit in the same pain they're feeling. Maybe it's the conflict they're dealing with or the struggle that they've walked through, and you're able to show up in that way to where they truly understand you are listening, like you're understanding where I'm coming from.
Yeah, this idea of that we're not problems to be fixed, we are people to be loved. And so this idea of empathy is me being able to put myself in your story and in your situation and feel with you. And I don't know why I'm such a high empath. I definitely believe that I got that from my dad. But if someone's telling a hard story and they start to tear up, you better believe I'm across the room crying with them. It just comes naturally, more for some than others. So don't feel like, oh, I have to cry or I'm not being empathetic. No, Gabe is very empathetic. He's grown so much in that way because he is able to hear somebody, our kids in particular, myself too, and feel. It might not always look like tears, but you're feeling what they're feeling. Mm-hmm. You're understanding, like, if I were to put myself in your shoes, I can't imagine what that might feel like. And so for some of you, that might feel really hard, like that you kind of stay more cerebral, you're in your brain, and you're logically trying to process where there are, but I would just even pray about that before you have a harder conversation about something that's very difficult to bring up, or a pain point for one of you that every time it comes up, one person's crying and the other person feels a little glazed over. Just pray before you go into it. Ask the Holy Spirit to kind of soften and knit your hearts in those topics, and ask him to give you that empathetic listening, that feeling, bearing one another's burdens in love.
And there's sometimes
it's practice and it grows.
There's sometimes we share this story in the book, The Fight for Us. We talk about this conversation we had at one point in one of the times we were digging deep into sort of some emotional wounds and healing that needed to happen. And I described this idea of biblical sorrow, which is this idea that I was able to see how I had impacted Rebekah for the first 15 years of our marriage by not being able to show up in an emotional way that she needed it. And for the longest time, I didn't understand it. I'm like, I'm just not emotional. I don't really need to feel everything that you feel. I'm a guy, you're a girl. Maybe we're just totally different. But as I was going through my own journey of healing and starting to connect my heart and my head so that I could feel again and start to feel my feelings, it was during that season I realized that she had really been alone, trying to communicate things to me that I didn't even understand what she was talking about. And I was able to feel this burden. This was empathy. Like, I could feel the burden of, like, that must have really sucked for her. Like, to not be able to have her husband show up in moments where she was longing for somebody to comfort her, to actively listen, to be empathetic. And I didn't have the capacity to give it. And I remember being in tears in that moment, sharing with her, like, what I was starting to see and feel. And God gave me the ability to, like, feel sorrow for how much she wasn't able to have somebody there for her in those moments. And that's just an example of where empathy can go. I think God wants each of us to reflect on, how have I not been able to maybe show up, and how has that impacted my spouse in ways that I need to take responsibility for? And I know it's a little bit of a deeper dive, but need to confess, like, this was not good. Like, I couldn't give you what you needed, and I'm sorry for that.
Yeah. And that's why empathy comes after active listening, because usually we can't empathize because we don't really listen. We dismiss and we just contend with our point.
And defend ourselves.
And we defend ourselves. And that was one of the first practical advice from our counselors. Like, you guys need to learn how to practice empathy. And we're like, what? Because at that point, we were still just going back and forth on who was right and who was going to stay in the fight long enough, who was going to be the last man standing. Yeah. And so now you're just approaching it a different way and go, okay, clearly we're missing each other. We have a different worldview on this particular topic. We were raised in a different home. Our origin stories look different around this specific thing. So I actually need to be a student of my spouse. I need to listen. I need to seek to understand. I need to be curious, ask questions so that I can start to feel what they're feeling. Yeah. There's just no other way for that to happen.
So the fourth skill that follows first active listening, mirroring, and empathy is disarming. So in a healthy conversation, there are going to be moments, especially with your spouse, things could get tense. You could be trying to do these things well, and something comes up and everything in you just rises up and you start to feel a sense of conflict. And the question is, when that moment happens, are you going to ratchet up the tension, or do you have practical ways to disarm?
Yeah, it's an intentional de-escalation of something, especially if someone's complaining or blaming. This disarming is like kind of slowly stepping back for a minute.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing. It's hard to do once things escalate and the amygdala starts going off and you're in that fight or flight zone. So the goal is to disarm prior. And it usually comes out in a place where how we've practiced disarming, I think most practically over the last few years, is when Gabe will do something that will trigger me and I will feel hurt, dismissed, or rejected in something that he says or a behavior. Maybe we're talking and he gets on his phone or whatever. I would always go, always. I would say always. I would say you always or you never, and this is who you are, which is terrible. Like that's the opposite of de-escalating.
That's escalating.
Actually, that's ramping that thing way up real fast. So the goal here is to have some phrases that you mean, not just that you're practicing, but maybe you act your way into feeling. Where I would say, I don't think this was your intention, but when you got back on your phone, I felt dismissed. I felt ignored, right? You can say, I'm not saying that you meant for me to do this, but that behavior or that practice or that habit makes me feel small or alone or whatever the negative emotion is. So you're not just going, you always do this and this is who you are, because that's horrible. It's more going, this behavior or these words, I feel sidelined, dismissed. So that way you're able to be vulnerable and you're able to pair it with something that might have triggered it, but you're also going, what was that? Like, and you've done the same with me. And so it's not like, it's not character assassination, but more like the patterns or the habits that have been unhealthy. We need to now recognize them and name them.
And you can also disarm if you're the person, maybe you stated something and you could see in your spouse, like them just shut off or go cold or tears start to form, and you realize words have come out of your mouth that are hurtful and you didn't mean to say it that way. You chose the wrong words. You didn't actually mean what you realize they're receiving. You can, as the person communicating, just stop in that moment and say, wait, let me say that again. I did not mean it to sound like that. I know that just sounded to you like I was totally rejecting you or I don't care what your opinion is. That is not what I meant to say.
Yeah.
And so that takes maturity. It takes practice.
It takes a pause.
Yep. It takes a deep breath. But it takes humility. And I think that's one of those qualities throughout these conversations. Like good, healthy conversations can only happen when there is a humility, when there's pride and you just think you're right and you're just trying to figure out how to persuade and win the argument. You're not going to win. You might win the argument, but you're not winning the relationship. And so the key is to be humble and to figure out how to learn from one another and realize there's something in this debate, this conflict, this moment, this conversation that we both will learn from.
Yeah. And the fifth rule of this healthy conversation is telling the truth. Seems so obvious, right? That we would just tell the truth. But a lot of times in conflict, we're going to edit ourselves to either have an angle, to withhold vulnerability because we don't feel safe, to kind of maybe keep a record of wrongs. And the bottom line is the reason there is a conflict behind every conflict, every tension, every flare-up, is there's something unresolved below that. And so whatever you're fighting about, 90% of it is historical, and 10% is about now. So if it's hysterical, it's historical. We talk about that in the spring. And this idea of going, okay, I would rather just be loud and get mad and blame and be right and just kind of stomp out of the room. But we've done that, and we both feel sad and alone. There is no win at the end of that. And then now we need to go back and try to repair, and it's so awkward. So telling the truth is going, okay, why am I? It does require a pause, and it might require 15 minutes because it has done all of that for us. But me stepping back and going to the room for a minute and be like, why am I so upset about this? Why is this triggering something so deep in me? And I'll have to go to the Lord often and go, where is this in my origin story? Why does this matter so much to me? Why am I hell-bent on being right on this particular thing? And then asking the Lord to show. And usually the Holy Spirit will just show me kind of some unresolved grief, some unresolved trauma. And I don't mean trauma in like crazy trauma of like an incident, but more chronic trauma. Sometimes just maybe I didn't feel in past seasons where I could tell the truth and it be welcomed, right? So sometimes we're reserved. But anyways, it just forces us to go back again and try to tell the truth in the best way we can.
Yeah, so as we're trying to establish this rhythm of us throughout this season, we know that the basis is the ability to have these conversations with one another. And the more you can grow in these, which you only grow in through practice, the more you grow in them, the better the conversations get, the more healing is possible. And as Rebekah said at the beginning, our book, The Journal for Us, walks through the 10 conversations every couple needs to have. Whether you're a newlywed, maybe you're preparing to get married like our son is, or whether you've been married for 50 years, these are the 10 conversations that in your marriage are going to keep coming up. And so the better we get at having these conversations by hopefully having a guide to help you walk through it, the healthier the rhythm's going to be of the healing and the repair, and the quicker that's going to happen whenever conflict erupts.
So we're not going to tell you the 10 today, but if you go ahead and subscribe for the season, make sure your friends know about it. We're going to unpack all of them in this entire season, and we're going to take time with it. We're going to make sure you feel equipped. We hope this is a resource you keep coming back to again and again. We are. We're coming back to it again and again. And I just hope you'll feel at the end of this season like, wow, there's been so much transformation just because you started talking and in a way that felt trusted and safe and honest. And ultimately, like, forgiveness follows this kind of stuff, this kind of confession, this kind of intimacy. Gabe and I will just say, on our Summer of Us, we did a trip together that redeemed the first story in the book, The Fight for Us. The last time we went together for more than 3 days was 3 years ago for our 25th anniversary. And if you've read The Fight for Us, you know that ended prematurely with a poison ivy outbreak. So it was time to figure out how to redo this. And so we went on a trip this summer, and we were both giddy at the end of the week. And I'm not saying this is normal or anything, but we both looked at each other and were like, how good is God in what he has done in our relationship, what he's restored, even in just since those last 3 years. And just part of this journey of just going, like, we want to be all in. We don't want to just tolerate each other and stay together, but not enjoy it. Like, what does God want to resurrect in your marriage? And so we're excited for the end of the season.
And throughout the season, we'll be bringing you great guests, people that are experts in these fields. We've got Josh and Christy Straub with us, who are incredible marriage and family and parenting relationship experts. We've got Rachel and Winston Cruz with us talking about money and the conflict that so many relationships deal with. There, we've got John Tyson joining us. We've got Ann Boskamp. We've got so many great people, great voices. Mark Patterson, people with a lot of wisdom walking through these rhythms. And how do you establish a great rhythm in your relationship with your spouse, as well as with others, that just help you live in a healthy way and bring healthy conversations back to the fore in our society, which I think is going to be crucial for healing for many of us as we walk through our families and our parenting as well as our marriages. So we look forward to continuing these conversations with you. Have a great week.